Hello and welcome to our webcast. We're pleased that you joined us for today's webcast, Not-for-Profit Boards, Drive Innovation with Generative AI. Before we begin, I'm going to play a brief video.
Welcome and thanks for joining us. Our webcasts are designed to help elevate your business performance. Transform your future for the better with advisory solutions tailored to your vision and supported by our collective technical resources. Our presentation will start in a few moments. Before we begin, here are a few things to keep in mind. You can customize how you both view our presentation and interact with the presenter. For better viewing, close all other applications and turn up your speaker volume. You can also adjust window size and placement or enter full screen mode using the controls at the top of the window or dragging the bottom right-hand corner to resize. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a series of icons, each relating to a different aspect of our session. You can download the group attendance sheet and a PDF copy of today's slides from the slide deck and handouts widget. You can ask our presenter questions during the webcast by typing a question in the Q&A window and clicking Submit. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the presentation or follow up via email. If you experience technical difficulty during today's presentation, refresh your browser by hitting the F5 key. Today's session will offer you 1 CPE credit. To receive credit, you must meet the requirements as specified by the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. You must attend at least 50 minutes of the session and respond to at least 75% or 3 of the 4 polling questions, which we'll ask throughout today's presentation. Polling questions will appear within the slide window. To participate in the polls, please click on your answer and be sure to hit the Submit button to record your response. We'll track your progress and alert you when you've earned CPE credit. You can then click the certificate icon in the CPE Progress widget and download your CPE certificate. Don't worry, if you can't download your CPE certificate today, we'll email a copy to you in 2 weeks. If you're attending this webcast in a group, you must complete our group CPE attendance sheet to receive credit. The attendance sheet is available in our slide deck and handouts widget. Please have all group members sign it and send only 1 sheet per group. Also note that CPE credit only can be awarded to participants registered as themselves and isn't available for participants who view the on-demand version. As a reminder, the presentation you're about to see is not legal, investment, or accounting advice. We encourage you to seek the counsel of a professional service provider to apply this content to your specific circumstances.
Before we get started, I wanted to share our big news that Moss Adams and Baker Tilly have joined forces to redefine accounting, tax, and advisory services for the middle market. It's really exciting, and you can read more about it on our website via the link in your console. And now, I would like to introduce today's presenters, Ali Chalak, Principal, and Casey Fike, Director. Their bios and contact information are located in your console if you would like more information. Now I'd like to turn the floor over to Casey to get the presentation started. Casey.
Awesome, Danielle, thank you. And thank you everybody for attending today. Really glad to be a part of this, work with my esteemed colleague, Ali. We talk quite a bit around technology and not-for-profits, but glad to be a part of this series. You know, we're talking innovation with generative artificial intelligence today. We have another upcoming one, adaptable strategic planning for mission-driven boards, coming up in November 6th. So please be looking for that. Please attend. Always great to see everybody. So looking forward to the discussion today. You know, one thing as I kind of move this slide here, very new technology. It changes. I'm keeping up with it daily. There's new techniques, things that we're doing for our clients and exploring. You know, if you have questions during this, feel free to use that Q&A on your screen, Not sure if we'll be able to get to them, at least during the discussion, but more than happy to follow up. So for this first one, why does, generative AI kind of matter? I can talk quite some time about how we're using it internally, but I think the big thing is, if I'm on this call today, is this kind of the right technology for me? There's a lot to unpack there, but generative AI, we're finding use cases. We're helping our clients that, they could be extremely small to be very enterprise, multi-billion dollar entities and organizations, right? It's not, what I'm kind of saying there is, it's not just, I don't have to be a certain size to utilize this technology. And again, utilizing the technology, we'll talk about different ways people are using different approaches, applications, but kind of what we have laid out here are some kind of where we're seeing efficiencies, right? That's, one thing that I do emphasize within our practice. It's, understanding where's their pain, where's their friction in your day-to-day, and then what's the right technology to apply to that. So I think cutting down on manual tasks, like when I think about this, it's, where can I use this technology to generate descriptions, analyze documents, analyze multiple documents, and identify discrepancies, right? Which kind of parlays nicely into that, getting more value from the data and the information that I have within my organization, right? And I think, as I say data, up until the advent of the explosion of generative artificial intelligence, our minds probably went to Excel or a database table or a dashboard, where large language models, and I'll get into more detail as we talk throughout this, but these really thrive in understanding natural language, so text, how am I kind of talking with this kind of technology. So I think to kind of close this slide, now, Lee, I know you have a couple things here, but it's about doing, we get this all the time within our automation and Gen AI practice. It's, we don't have the ability to bring on an additional resource. We can't backfill. That's where I kind of see, like, how do we apply the right technology, in this case, generative artificial intelligence, to do more with less, right? Really in a cost-effective manner. So, Lee, I don't know if you had anything to add to this.
Yeah, Casey, I think you brought up a couple of good points here, being more efficient. So right before this, I pulled up a survey from MIT that was completed back in June of 2025. And organizations that implemented generative AI reduced their financial close process by about 8 days. And then they've also noticed that staff were spending about 8.5% of their time less on routine and back office process. And I think our team members are using some form of AI software more than we know. And basically, what happened was McKinsey did put out this report that executives believed only about 20% of their workforce was using it, whereas in actuality, it was about 47% of their workforce was using it. So I think with that said, more of our employees and staff are using it than what the senior leadership team is aware of. But then it is providing more efficiency in some of the routine processes.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? I think the unknown usage, and I'll kind of talk about this, but one thing that we do talk with a lot of clients about is this use of, like, what we're calling like shadow AI, where, hey, this group within the business might be using ChatGPT. This group might have reached out to Microsoft and now they're subscribing to the enterprise Microsoft Copilot license, right? So I think, really at the heart of my practice is data. Now it's structured and unstructured, as I talked about earlier. But things that we'll talk about throughout this is organizations need to have a consistent approach to, here's the platform we're using. Employees need to be aware, and this could be driven by policy and governance. How do I use this? What data can I put into this? What can I not include in this? Can I include a donor list? And again, really for me, you need to understand if I'm using a third party, if I'm using ChatGPT and I send that donor list to ChatGPT, that data is retained by ChatGPT. Now I'll talk about our solution later on, where your data stays behind your firewall. But there's so much hype, and I'll get into this in the later slides as I kind of advance this one, so we don't get stuck on the first one. But just really understanding how these things work, being cognizant of your data, which I know is a bit of a foreign concept to a lot of people that don't use these on a day-to-day basis. Here, kind of questions we're asking, we're working with our clients on is where can we get a quick win with generative AI? My mind immediately goes to knowledge bases where we have institutional knowledge within our employees' minds. There's ways we can now harvest that through recording transcripts, putting that into your own internal GPT tool. Now I can have a question around, this donor, give me a background on how you've interacted with this donor in the past. I think about taking also in that knowledge-based concept, it's our internal policies and procedures. If you're like Baker Tilly, you probably have those on a SharePoint site somewhere. There could be multiple versions. They're difficult to get access to. They're difficult to interpret. I was talking with the CFO of a separate industry, but she had said, I get the same question 10 times a day. I have to stop what I'm doing to answer that question. I have to then get re-engaged with the project or the work I was working on. What we're doing is we're taking those for our clients and putting them onto to their own internal knowledge base where, hey, I have a process to onboard a new donor. What does that look like? I can then ask questions with that text. I can get the responses that I need, reducing that friction. Right. So again, that kind of gets into the last kind of a couple pieces here, and I'll talk about governance momentarily. But we have this information internally. It's just very difficult to get access to it. How can we bring some efficiency to that process? And again, with this knowledge-based concept, that's where we're kind of seeing a lot of immediate quick wins and bringing a lot of efficiency. I think this, also on that takeaway, it's not a magic bullet. It's not like we're using generative AI. We're an extremely, we've saved all this, right? I think there's a part of, and I'll talk about this in a later slide, on like how in the world do we use this? Because it's not magic pixie dust. It's not a silver bullet as we have here. It's a new technology. It's new software. Really, personally, at the end of the day, it's software. How do I work with this? How do I use this? So moving this along, here's our first poll, but what describes your current organization's use with generative AI? Like, we haven't started all the way to, I look at number D, we're fully optimized. We have multi-agentic workflows. I'm not going to get too technical on this. And then E is, I don't know what it is, which feel free to answer now.
And
always, you got to get the CCE. So, yeah.
Casey, while we give the attendees some time to respond, high level, what are some of the themes and that you're hearing while talking about generative AI with clients, prospects, one-on-one meetings with CFOs?
Can I hold that till our next slide?
Sure.
I love the question is great, but I'll talk about that.
Okay.
Right, because I'm seeing we get a lot of fear from, like, if I think of a CEO, I had a conversation a little while ago. It's, hey, we're scared to use it. We're scared not to use it. We just don't know where to start, right? And I think there's always that kind of like, what resources do we have available from a funding perspective, from a change management perspective, to a what's the right first use case perspective. Danielle, do you want me to advance the perfect? Yeah, I think I look at these first two bullets. We haven't started. We're exploring ideas. Like, I think that's great. I look at that second one, and it's great to see a third of attendees. Hey, we're starting to think about it, right? It kind of gets back to that kind of fear concept. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but here, this Gen AI fluency, like, this is my mission, right? Where it's working with clients is, for all organizations, our first and our messaging is like, we need to build fluency around generative artificial intelligence into your organization, or those first couple of use cases with a specific business unit, right? There's so much, like, like I was saying, like, I keep up with this stuff every day. There's a ton in media. There's a ton on YouTube. There's a ton of newsletters. There's a ton of quote unquote thought leaders on just kind of, AI is going to take my job. And that's something that we talk about quite a bit, where it's, what we've said is we're not seeing AI come in and totally eradicate business units. Like, that is something that we're not seeing. What we are seeing, as and if I think down the road, it's that individual that is comfortable with using generative artificial intelligence, that is using generative Gen AI. I'll stop tripping over myself here. That's the person that is going to kind of be retaining that job versus somebody that's like saying, I'm just not going to use this. So back to this fluency piece, you know, if I kind of work cross on these two visuals here on the slide, it's Gen AI is not a search engine. It's not, you know, what is the current weather today? It's not like a Google or Bing, your search engine of choice. It's something, the way I think about it is I can have a conversation with somebody that has an infinite more amount of knowledge than I do about a specific topic, whatever's kind of been out there, right? And again, as I kind of step it down to the next level and I start to the right there, it's not a database. And I'm going to split hairs a little bit here just because these large language models have been trained, have been fed mountains and mountains of data out there. Like I know all of Wikipedia is in ChatGPT's model. That is a drop in the bucket of what it has been trained or fed information on. But again, to that, it's not a database. It's a conversational participant, right? So it's a way where I can go out and I can generate content. I can create, you know, marketing approaches, marketing messages, versus, you know, like I said, like, hey, show me the last, and I'll have some examples here, but it's show me the last X, Y, Z. Again, starting on the right side in that third bullet, we talk about this quite a bit. It's, you know, for our clients that are using our technology, it's you have to keep your hands on the steering wheel. It's not something that just you let run wild. Again, you know, Ollie, I think about how I generate, you know, LinkedIn articles. Now it's having a conversation with somebody like yourself. I'm understanding the nonprofit space. I'm understanding where there's, you know, pain and friction. And then I'm talking about how we can use the right technology to bring some efficiency to that. That's kicking me out a LinkedIn article. That's still, if I post that on LinkedIn, those are my words, that's my voice, right? So it's still taking that, generating that as a very well-polished first draft. But then I need to kind of make sure it's in Casey's voice, right? So it's keeping your hands on the wheel, not letting these things run wild. We still need to vet and validate the output, just because I think there's other things that these large language models can make mistakes. They can hallucinate. Again, these are things that you need to consider and think through and work with as you kind of bring these into your organizations.
Casey, one thing I've had a lot of conversations with some of my clients on, you know, in the not-for-profit space who are implementing Gen AI is specifically in the grant writing and proposal space, you know, where it would help them with 60% of the proposal. And then that 40% would be complemented by a human factor, you know, adjusting tax, adjusting, you know, looking at the financial information that's included in the proposal or the grant, right? You know, the grant. And I think really it creates that efficiency, but you're right, that human element is very important. Without it, you can't rely 100% on Gen AI to draft a proposal for you, you know, or even a donor acknowledgement letter or whatever it may be.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's spot on where and I have an example of that later in the deck on kind of what we're doing, but it's a participant within my day-to-day. It's not replacing Casey. I'm not an AI generated avatar, right? But you're spot on where it's like applying for grants, right? I think that's something that takes probably a lot of people on the phone on this webinar quite a bit of time to do. If I could get just an initial first draft, that's going to save 80% of my time. And then I'm kind of looking through that and I'm polishing it up. You know, I can then now apply for more grants, which I think that's kind of, you know, reducing friction in your processes. So that's a great point. And that's something, again, I have an example of later. Here, you know, again, this is probably as technical as we're going to get, but if you're following along with this technology, if we look at kind of where we at the very top, there's these concepts of agents, and that's where these are kind of like subtask. I have a specific task to go look at this website. I have a specific task to go look at these historical documents, which is kind of managed by what I'll call just a project manager agent. That's pretty far down the spectrum. That's stuff that we are working with. But if I kind of work back, here's this point that we were just talking about earlier. It's how can I use generative AI to assist with my day-to-day, right? And then maybe step into kind of augment where there's tasks that I'm just kind of letting that go. Again, hands on the wheel. But, here it's, we're working with our clients and we're on the assist stepping into that augment phase because that's where everybody is. And that's where we try to meet everybody. We're not trying to force these multi-agentic workflows on people saying this is the right way. It gets back to this, how do we slowly over time build up AI fluency within our organization? Again, understanding the technology, understanding the use cases, what's the right fit for us to help us kind of step in and utilize this rapidly evolving technology. Which brings us to our next poll. Which of the following is the biggest challenge your organization faces with adopting generative AI? And I did see a question in the Q&A around keeping data safe. I will address that, but I think that's me personally. I'm a data person. It's always kind of, where's my data going? How is that being used? I think as these poll answers come in to build onto that, again, I have an example. I was talking with a client. They're a retail company. They're not publicly traded. They took their P&L, they put it into ChatGPT. They said, hey, it kicked out this great bar chart around our revenue growth. And I'm like, that's cool. That's a great use case. But now that data is retained by ChatGPT. It goes into further training ChatGPT model releases, which happen once every 3 to 6 months. Your data is no longer your data. I'll talk about ours and kind of, again, how that data stays behind your firewall. But I get to think about like fluency again, number one. How am I using this? Understanding from a governance perspective, which we'll cover later as well. Acceptable use. What can I use? What data can what information can I put this into? Yeah, that second bullet, kind of the data. I'm on the same page with the 38% that got there. I think that first one as well, lack of internal expertise and fluency. That's a great one. Again, there's so much hype out there. And again, like I keep talking about, it's building that fluency, identifying what's the right first use case, which I know came up on the previous poll, but kind of stepping through that.
Yeah, and Casey, one thing is that the results of the survey coincides with the survey that was done by the Technology Association of Grant Makers, where 55% of the respondents were concerned about security and privacy. 43% was, expertise and fluency was a concern of theirs. And lastly, relevancy of AI was about 40%. So what we're seeing here also mirrors that survey that we were looking at earlier this week.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's the data and the use, right?
Right.
So here, again, the ways we kind of think about it, work with our clients around it is, just because this technology is available, do we really need to use it? And again, things that I think about are always like, where is there friction in your business processes day to day? How can I bring efficiency to those? All the way down to kind of that risk and compliance. Again, I think about governance. I think about, trainings that we've done for organizations where we kind of step through use cases, we use some tools, we use our tool, but it's kind of just, again, making sure that people are aware and how do we bring this, again, things that we do, bring this into an organization so it's safe and effective, right? If I kind of look at this kind of chart, there's things in my day-to-day which are completely different than I think people listening on this call, where I'm using taking transcripts, again, and getting approval to record calls, but having that transcript, right, so I can have a more meaningful conversation with that person that I'm talking to, put that into our internal tool, and then kick out it, and then it returns a summary, and I'm able to do follow-up there. So I know we're kind of halfway through. I will pass to you. And again, as you're talking, I'll look through some of these questions in the chat and try to address. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, rookie move. Casey and I have been talking to a lot of our not-for-profit clients, and then our prospects as well. The next two slides really follows the theme of where through these conversations where we really see the benefit, especially in the not-for-profit sector. So the first one is really fundraising and donor engagement. I think we've talked about this earlier, relating to the grant writing and the proposal drafting, but then also, personalized outreach, right? Whether it's email or through a chat bot, and then how we could use AI to re-engage donors where we've lost that relationship with. So a lot in the fundraising space, a lot in the proposal space, that's where we see some of the efficiencies goes. Operations, I think this has a bigger impact. So, we've talked about policies and procedures. We're looking at those if we have to continuously refer back to a manual, or if it's somewhere stored on SharePoint, or, in our internal websites, that creates inefficiency. Whereas if somebody puts into a chat box, what is the approval limits for checks greater than $50,000 or whatever it might be, right? That's more efficient to find. So what we're seeing is more efficiency internally surrounding the policy procedures, the grant making process, the contributions life cycle, and then also the financial close and reporting. Lastly is program delivery. And really here is what happens if we could use generative AI to predict where the demands are. So if we're in a region where there's a natural disaster, well, who do we need to get the dollars out to for a community foundation, for example? How fast, when, and things of that nature, right? If we could have AI assist with that, or if you're in the CDFI lending space, helping with our identifying borrowers, analyzing credit qualities, borrower risks, and then also creating the loan documents, and the loan applications, and having this generative AI platform do the first level approval of that, So once again, on the program delivery side, it also helps us assist identify micro and macro events that will predict when communities will need support and how much. Further, what we've looked at is, data and impact of measurement. And I know Casey's really talked about this significantly, but how can we use the AI tools to help us analyze our cash needs, our liquidity needs, budgets to actuals? I know I have organizations where they spend 3 or 4 months on the budget process, right? Well, what happens if we could shorten that to a couple of weeks because of AI? And then what we're also seeing in the annual reports is, especially with grant making organizations, what is the impact that the dollar that I've granted out has, and what is the ripple effect of that, right? If we could have our AI tools predict that and then put that finding in our annual report, obviously with the support of our employees, well, that just cuts down on the amount of hours. One thing that we will be talking about is and Casey, you probably are in this more than I am, is data overload and data management. But then also, we have a lot of data. We have donor lists. We have grant outcomes. We have delivery reports. We have all of this data, federal awards, and all of these information at our disposal. and how can we use it to be able to deliver our mission and make a greater impact to our community that we're serving, right? And lastly, not so much discussion here, but a little bit that we're seeing is in the advocacy and awareness space. So I know Casey talked about, our LinkedIn articles that we put in our white pages. Well, same with our not-for-profits, what they're seeing as well, or what they're putting out as articles and information. They're using a little bit of the generative AI to assist with the first draft of that information. But once again, the advocacy and awareness sector, that's less, I'm having less discussion about, and more on the internal and the internal processes and efficiencies in our business or in our operations. That's where a lot of the discussions we're having. With that said, so here are, and I know there was some questions on this, where we're seeing this and consideration. So just want to just to emphasize this, really AI enhances internal controls by reducing or automating repetitive tasks, providing continuous real-time monitoring, helping with fraud risk detections, improving data analytics, and things of that nature. But one thing we'll need to do is start from the top, right? Our governance, our board, our senior leadership team, and making sure that there is that technical expertise in there, or you have resources to help when it comes to setting policies, setting governance regarding AI. But one thing that we've seen, and we'll talk about this more often, a little bit in the next slide, is that, going back to that survey I referenced earlier by the Technology Association of Grantmakers, about 63 respondents to that survey said that they don't have an AI policy, or they don't have a governance structure to support AI, where, and I find that interesting because so much of the workforce within the not-for-profit sector is using AI. Next is, fluency, on the audit side, specifically as we're using Gen AI to reduce the amount of audit work we'll need to do, and along with publication. But once again, I think we need to start with a strategic plan. We need to think about our governance structure and work our way down. And then also, lastly, I do want to emphasize the transparency aspects of it when it comes to audits as well. It does help auditors when audit transactions, and then it'll create a more efficient and effective audit process. Casey, anything else to add here?
No, I think that's great. Right. I think I'm looking at the QA, and I think as this next poll comes up, I have some things that we can kind of address here, because I think there's overlap. But go ahead and finish the slide.
Yeah, so here are some real world examples of where organizations have used Gen AI. This is all public information, but Charity Water predicts, and they're using it to predict and prevent well breakdowns, and then they're able to target areas, and that's where they'll put resources to basically maintain the wells. The UN will use AI for disaster response and refugee support. So in areas where resources are limited, when there is a natural disaster, what they're finding, it's harder to send resources to those areas, whether it's goods or dollars. So the UN has implemented this AI program to assist with that, and then the Wildlife Conservancy Society. But overall, you're slow. These are bigger organizations with larger budgets, but then there are many other examples of smaller organizations with smaller budgets who are implementing this. Going back to that survey of grant makers, about 19% of the foundations reported no AI usage. In contrast, 64% of those foundations reported that less than a few people within the organization are leveraging AI. And about 10% report that multiple departments are leveraging AI. So even though at the board level, at the senior leadership level, we don't have an AI policy, or we haven't formally incorporated this, your team is using some sort of AI tool in their day-to-day life and work. And they're using their own tools, whether it might be OpenAI or some of the other free tools as well. And that's important to note, because once again, if you're using OpenAI, you input some confidential information in there, that data is no longer your data. It's then given to OpenAI, as Casey mentioned. So having an understanding of where it's being used formally, informally, and then being able to create a policy around that will create more structure and more safeguards around your data and the processes of when it comes time to use AI. But just know that a lot of the employees are actually using AI tools in some way, fashion, or form.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add to that, sorry, what we're seeing with a lot of like cloud-based ERPs, I know NetSuite, we have a large NetSuite practice. A lot of these applications are now launching AI features within their existing base, right? So it's for me, like I said this earlier, it's how is that being used? What data is being fed into that? How is it using my existing data? Where's that data going, right? So I think it's, again, very rapidly changing technology, but advancing very quickly. So again, to Ali's point, it's needing to understand where is AI being used outside of just using generative AI today within our organization. Where is AI being used intentionally or unintentionally? I really liked that you brought up, Ali, where within our organization. So it was good points and just things to consider.
Definitely, and thanks for pointing that out, because what that survey of grant makers found was 60% of the respondents were using a free version of ChatGPT, 41% Copilot, and 31% Zoom Companion. So individuals are using it, but do we as an organization have an understanding of where they're using it and where that data is going, whether it's to transcribe a virtual meeting, whether it's to take notes, or doing some kind of analysis. All right. With that said, do you want to take this one, Casey?
Yeah. So, and I'm looking at the QA, and I'm going to try to do both here. But where do you see the most value for Gen AI to drive impact, right? And as you read through those, I'm seeing a couple things in the QA. This one's interesting. I think we're getting a lot of grant applications that you can clearly tell were just written within Gen AI. I've seen, the explosion of this tool with oncologists, with students using this to just put in a few sentences, write me a paper, 1,000-word paper on this, right? Again, I get back to I'm using generative AI to augment, to bring efficiency to things I'm trying to put out. Again, the LinkedIn article. At the end of the day, that's my voice, right? So I can use it as a tool to augment and bring efficiency, but I still need to go back through and review that. I think I look at another one, AI, like I said earlier, these large language models, they're not flawless. They make mistakes. I saw a couple months ago where some lawyer in some state was citing legal briefs or legal history that didn't exist. And turns out this individual just went to ChatGPT. Again, you need to trust, you need to validate, and you need to verify, because again, they're not flawless. Enhancing data analysis and dashboards. That's interesting. That's the next slide. Automating internal processes. And then the streamlining grant applications. I think those all make a lot of sense, and still unsure. I mean, that's spot on, right? I think it's always hard to kind of find the first use case. And as I kind of talk through like what we've done internally and what we're doing for clients, I think hopefully that'll come to more fruition. So again, apologies about the small kind of screenshot here, but what we've done internally is, and I'll talk about this, is we've developed our own tool that we're using internally, and then our clients are now using as well. Stays behind our firewall, make sure our data stays our data, and I think also a big part of this is we have client data. We saw the need to use this technology, and it was how do we make sure that our staff, our clients can use this and keep their data safe so it's not retained by these models. But what we're looking at here is this concept of, and I saw this on the other slide, and Ali, you mentioned this, where I have all this information saved in some system. It's painful to go in, create a dashboard off of it. If I'm not sure of the table structure or the underlying columns within a report, it's slow to go in. It takes me forever to go in and run that report in Excel and then do a pivot table. So what we're looking at here is a generative AI overlay to what this is on the top of a data warehouse, which a data warehouse is a way that I could store data from multiple systems, brings efficiency to that data gathering process. But here, what we're looking at is I can now go query, I can have a conversation with my data about my data. So Ali, that meant, that natural disaster example you gave, hey, this flooding occurred in Texas or wherever that may be. Who do I have in that area that I need to send a benefit to? Again, that could be something that I'd have to log into this system and find that specific report, download the report. This is more instantaneous where I can have a conversation with that. It can provide the output. And when I say conversation, again, you can continue that conversation. So it's not just a one-time search, but it's kind of melding this concept around data warehousing, data analytics, and then using this technology where I can now kind of chat and ask questions about my existing data. This next one, I've seen this come up in chat. I've seen this, this is kind of a look of ours, and I've talked about this earlier, we're agents, but again, I think about applying for a grant. There's, information on the web. There's historical documentation that we have internally, our procedures, our policies. There's past grants that we might be using to kind of, here's how we apply. Here's how, this is our kind of verbiage, this is what we use. For me, those are all kind of different data sources, and as opposed to kind of having to go one by one, this is kind of an overlay where I can go out and use agents to go query the web, to go look at my historical applications, to go look at my policies, my procedures, any other information around that I want to feed into this. We can develop agents that can go do those subtasks, right? So again, I've seen this in the chat. Ali, I've been talking about this. This is a way you can bring a ton of efficiency to the grant application process. Again, it's at the end of the day, it still needs to be in your organization's terms, how you respond. One thing around large language models is their outputs. They love the double M dashes, the dash dash. That's one thing I do look at if I'm seeing something I'm interested if somebody just took this directly out of ChatGPT. But again, these are ways that we are helping our clients. Again, I talked about the knowledge bases earlier. These are these really kind of cutting edge use cases where we can take this technology and apply it to where we have, again, friction in our processes.
Casey, on that standpoint, I think there was a question in the chat on that note. How do we know, or what do we need to do to ensure that the information that's being generated by Gen AI is accurate? And I think that's where the human element comes in, not to just rely 100% on what was generated, whether it's a proposal or whatever it is, but that's where you have to go in there, vet it, review it, make sure it makes sense before the proposal submitted or for whatever you're doing. So that's the human element needs to be there, and you can't be hands off. Is that correct?
Correct, right? Again, it's augmentation. It's I'm using this as a participant in my day-to-day. It's not replacing Casey. It's not replacing anybody on my team. It's how can I use this technology to bring efficiency? So as I kind of move to this slide, It's, how are we kind of, helping our clients, our customers get started, right? And if I kind of start at the bottom, again, fluency. How in the world does this work, right? So we've done training sessions, and I'll talk about the implementations that we've done. It's, building that initial fluency, right? And then kind of, if I get back up to the beginning, it's where do we start? Use case identification, where can we come in, use generative artificial intelligence as a participant, as a augmentation, as a participant in the process, which kind of gets to that shadow AI, where we need a consistent approach, organization by organization. Here's how we're using generative artificial intelligence. Here's the solution we're going to use. And again, that last bullet in the bottom, it's that solution that I talked about that we've internally developed. It needs to stay in-house. Our data needs to stay behind our firewall. We still would like to use the generative AI kind of solution and technology. Here, kind of, as I think through, what is the right approach for us? And I've seen, again, some ChatGPT, there's some opportunity there where I can not send my data, but still utilize the technology. But I'm thinking through build, partner, or buy, right? So if we build internally, similar to what we've done here at Baker Tilly, that's something the development teams that I know have done. We've seen those as well. I have a client I was just talking to where we're kind of assisting with their build, but do we have, if I think through this, do I have a team of developers on staff already that aren't consumed with their day-to-day where we could go build our own solution and call whatever API we'd like. The partnering, again, this is kind of similar to what we're offering, where it's, do we work with somebody like a Baker Tilly where they can come in, they have a solution, we can customize it with them, meaning we can get our own documentation in there, we can get into that concept of knowledge bases, the policies and the procedures, get that in there. Or lastly, do we go buy a standalone? Again, this is something also we're working with our clients on, where there's a lot of generative AI solution offerings out there, very specific use cases. Some have worked quite well. Some, to be honest, are just kind of vaporware, where you might be the first customer, or there might be a very small customer base. Again, these are things that I think through. Again, if I get back to what are our first initial use cases, then I kind of think through this as what's the right way to step into it.
So on that note, Casey, before we jump into the polling question, where do you see a lot of the clients? Is it in that partner, the build, or the buy phase? Where do you see most of your clients going?
Got it. Yeah, it's probably right in the middle, where I think about build, probably not, just because, again, new technology, and I have to bring on a set of developers to build that out. On the opposite end of or the other end, the buy, I've seen, we have a lot of clients that use Copilot. They've stepped up there and they're using the enterprise license. It's fairly pricey. Again, right there in the middle is where we're partnering with our clients on, can we build the fluency? Can we identify those use cases? Can we get a tool internally? That's where we're kind of seeing most of the interaction. And then we're kind of doing consulting on the opposite ends of the spectrum, on the building and the buying. So,
and on that note, who's at the table with you when you're having these discussions?
Yeah, great question.
Accounting? Is it IT? Are the auditors involved? Who's involved?
The auditors that have not been involved, it's usually executive leadership, where we have that level saying we're interested, we'd like to use generative artificial intelligence, but it also then is a level down, just because I think about kind of the people in the day-to-day, not to say executives aren't in the day-to-day, but that next level down is where they can see okay, here's where there's pain. Here's where we think we could use generative artificial intelligence to bring some efficiency, like Baker Tilly, what are your thoughts, right? So it's kind of a combination where, again, executive leadership is saying here's the direction we want to go. Okay, let's identify where there's friction. And then again, really, I get to it. Is generative AI, like I'm not one to just push Gen AI, push it, but it's what I kind of led with, whereas like what's the right technology to alleviate that burden? So, because we're seeing derivatives off of there where it's a Alteryx robotic process automation type of a quote unquote AI. But again, it's it's understanding the pain and applying the right the right technology, excuse me.
Thank you.
Got to see the AI risk and governance. And I agree with, not to say I disagree with everybody, but I think we really need to think organization-wide, just because things that Ali have talked about where like AI is everywhere, shadow AI. We want to make sure that there is a consistent, unified approach where it's, if I think of that cross-functional group, my vision would be like IT/information security, depending on how your organization is structured. We need to have tech leadership in there. We also need to have kind of what I called, that next level down from the executives on here's where we're seeing the use cases. And then again, I do think that kind of executive director, or maybe if you have an audit or risk committee, I'm kind of seeing a cohesive unit on overall strategy, overall direction. How do we then go apply?
And you mentioned one important thing. I think strategy. We need to have all the stakeholders at the table talk about strategy, what we want to do with Gen AI, which areas we want to work on, and then properly plan and then execute. I feel that sometimes people are really hasty and just trying to execute, and we're, while that's great, and I love the enthusiasm behind it. But without proper planning, there's going to be a lot of efficiencies and a lot of hiccups down the road. So, taking your time, seeing what is the strategic plan, what objectives are we trying to accomplish here, what are the redundancies we're trying to do, and then move to execute.
Agree. So again, kind of as we kind of wind down this presentation, it's these next steps. It's identifying, again, I really think, and when I talk through this, I should have led with this, but I'm trying not to focus on the technology. I'm trying to focus on where's their friction, where are the use cases, right? And then it's kind of like, then we step into, who are those kind of champions? Who's leading that? Is it the owner of the business unit? Is it somebody else? Is it kind of like our AI task force team, which I've seen kind of pop up in organizations, again, identifying kind of what I've been talking about, then stepping in, like what's the right approach for us? Is that build, partner, is it buy? And I think really at the end, it's as we kind of pull those together, identifying those first couple of use cases, we've seen it internally grow organically where people are coming to me saying like, hey, I used your tool this way. And it's something that I had never thought about because, again, individuals in a large firm like ours, their day-to-day, their projects they're working on are very different than the projects that I'm working on. But again, I look at that as, okay, we're starting to become more fluent in how to use generative AI because people are coming to me with unique use cases. Again, I talked about this earlier. There's a ton of information out there. I think like here are a couple of examples. I do have a couple people I follow on YouTube. That's just kind of a good way for me to kind of learn, seeing what they're doing, seeing somebody talk versus kind of like the reading or podcast. I don't have much time for reading and podcasts. But I look at some of these, the keynotes. I like those. I think of those keynotes as like, hey, here are product releases coming out 6 months, or here's things that we're thinking about 12 months down the road. Again, I think that test piece as well, where I'm using ChatGPT. I'm being very cognizant of the data that I'm putting in there. Again, I think about, ChatGPT, and saw that point in the QA. It's been 1,000 days. I can still remember the first conversation I had about internally around this have you seen this ChatGPT thing? It's pretty amazing. And then it was like, okay, how do we leverage that so we can use it in a safe, effective manner? And that's what kind of spurned up the tool that we built internally. So again, there's a lot out there. I think for everybody listening, try a couple, see which ones you like. Like I said, there's a lot of hype, and it's a matter of kind of cutting through that. So again, I know we just have 5 minutes left. There was a lot in the QA. I apologize, I couldn't get to it. We couldn't get to it all. We'll definitely follow up via email. And I think, there's our contact information by all means. Like I led with, this is a very rapidly growing, rapidly changing technology. There's a ton of hype. Again, my initiative around our practice is let's cut through the hype, let's build that fluency, and then get organizations set up in a safe manner. So with that said, Ali, I don't know if you have anything to close on, but if not, Danielle, we can pass it back to you.
I don't. Thank you, everyone, for being so engaged through this process. We really appreciate it. Reach out to any one of us to discuss more about this. I'm still learning, and I think there's a lot of good information out there.
Great. Thank you, Ali and Casey, for a great presentation today. To our audience, and to reiterate what our presenters have just told you, if you have any further questions or comments, please reach out to us as we would be happy to continue the conversation. You can drop a note in the Q&A window or reach out to Ali or Casey directly. Their contact information is in your console. If we didn't have time to answer a question during the presentation, we'll do our best to follow up with you afterwards. Also, I'd like to draw attention to the image in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Click this to be taken to more information on our board governance series, and be sure to register for the next webcast, Adaptable Strategic Planning for Mission-Driven Boards, which will be held November 6th. Hopefully you can join us for that one as well. If you met all CPE requirements, your certificate is available to download now in the CPE progress window. A copy will be emailed within 3 weeks should you have any trouble downloading it now. Finally, here's a link to an online survey for today's presentation. Thank you for joining our webcast, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.